Okay, so yeah, in this session, basically what we will do is in the last session, we talked about endpoints and endpoint services, and we discussed how we can minimize the AWS cost if we make use of the VPC endpoints, right? So that we can have that access to the AWS managed services like S3 bucket or a RDS. We can access them from the private subnet without actually defining the NAT gateway, right? So because NAT gateway is expensive and we don't want to be uh, paying cost for just accessing AWS managed services. So similarly, we can, there is another concept in AWS where we can, where we can create our own endpoint services, which means, let's say there is a banking there is a stock market where they can host their own service. Like if you send the stock symbol, it can tell you the what is the current stock price and what is the bid price, and or something related to that stock. It can give, let's say that is the service I want to host in my VPC, and also I want to share that particular service to my paid customers. Like, so there is another mutual fund company or somebody who wants to get access to this exclusive private service. I should be able to provide or share my service to that particular client, which means that client could be having another AWS account from where you should be able to access my service privately. So that is what I am trying to cover in this session, where I will in this today what I'm going to do is I'm going to write like in the last session I kind of explained that web service which I developed, that the same web service, the calculator service, which I will be deploying in my private subnet, and then start creating an endpoint for that. And once I create the endpoint, then I will log into my another AWS account to show how I can create an endpoint which can use this service. All right, so what I will do is straight away, before I go further, I will explain my VPC. Right now, I do have my VPC here, where I see I have a training VPC here I created, and I do have my own subnets in it. I have created two private subnets and two public subnets here, where I will be spinning up my EC2 instances. And then of course, if we look at the route table, I do have two route tables. One is public route table where I have my internet gateway, and I have my default or private route table where I have local routing and NAT gateway. Okay, so this is what my current VPC is. So let me straight away start an instance from here. Any questions here? Okay, so what I do is I will spin up two instances quickly. I have selected my private subnet. Let me select my private subnet 1. And I don't want any public IP address, but what I will want is I want EC2 access. Then on the advanced, like I showed in the last session, I will be copying my application deployment logic, that automated logic. So what it will do is it will copy, let me show you that what I'm trying to do here. So it will download the war file, my application file from S3 bucket, which I have already uploaded. And then it downloads Java and Tomcat, installs it, and my war will be deployed there. Okay, so tag, I'm adding a name called secure server 1. I have used it, and I will create a new security group where I will open TCP port 8080, and yeah, HTTP, I'm just keeping it 80. Sometimes I don't need this. I'm just trying to keep it, and I will share this name as my DMZ security group. So I do have my private key. So I'm attaching that to this instance in case I want to log into it, but I don't need to be logging into this particular EC2 instance. I'm starting another instance into another availability zone. Same thing I'm going to do here. I have selected my VPC, and then I'm going to put it in the private subnet 2. And then again, I don't need public IP. And here I'm accessing role so that the CC2 can access S3 bucket, because my Bootstrap script requires some files to be downloaded from there. I'm adding another tag. I say secure server 2. So I will select the existing security group. I have all these ports open, and I again use the same this thing, and then so what it will do is it will have our application up and ready. So to check that, what I'll do is I'll create a Bastion host, which I can use it for testing my application is up or not. So I'm creating one EC2 instance in public subnet so that I can access it. And I'm not installing any application here. I'm just going with the default ones. I'm using that as a Bastion server. Again, I want SSH only. I don't need actually a HTTP, but I'm using that same security group, and I am using the same keys. So these two are running now. Let me take the public IP address. Just I want to make sure for my application is up, or I don't think we need to do that. Also, what we can do is now our goal is, let's say my application is up. I mean, my web application is up and it's been deployed in 2 private servers, that is West 2A and 2B availability zones. They are in the private subnet, right? So they will not be able to get a public IP address. They are very secure and nobody can reach it. But now what I will do is, my objective is to create a endpoint service. So for creating endpoint service, I go to VPC, where I can go to create endpoint service here. Okay, so this is the dialog where endpoint service requires you to create a network load balancer. I am going to create that network load balancer now. So here I'm creating the network load balancer. I say my application, my endpoint service load balancer. I will keep it internet facing because this is not going to be used within this VPC, and this will be used by other accounts as well. And the port which I will open is 8080 because my web application will be running in 8080 port. And the VPC I select here is my training VPC, where I have two availability zones where my server is running in the actually I have to select the public subnets so that the routes will be created so that people can be able to reach out to this particular load balancer. This is what the mistake we did, if you remember, in the last or one of the session in the VPC. Then we have to have a target group. Target group, basically, it will be, that is where our instances will be running. I mean, we have two instances, EC2 instances, where the application server is running. So I will create that target group. And again, this target group is also listening to TCP port 8080. Then I'll have to register my instances to this target group. So I do have my server 1 and server 2 selected because this is where my Tomcat web application is running, right? So I click on add to my target group, then I go to next and then create it. Let's give some time. So what I did is basically I started from here. If you remember, I started from creating the endpoint service, right? So when I created endpoint service, it asked me to create a network load balancer. That's what I did by clicking here. So it took me to that place. So now I have my network load balancer created. I will be selecting that.
So Hari,
yeah.
Is it load balancer creation is required or mandatory here, or we can skip it?
No, I mean, one of the mandatory parameter, if you look at this, right, you see the star here, that means you'll have to have a network load balancer.
Yeah, but maybe, my application is not requiring, because the load balance is required when you have much traffic, right, to just route and maybe in round robin or, less latency stuff. But
yeah,
I mean, it's a very small application. I mean, it has to be there, or like, how is it? Because I know this star is there, so we don't have option. But just thinking that, when it's a free tier and normally we do a small application, so
yeah.
I mean, we don't need actually, right?
Got you. So what it recommends is, I mean, when we create the endpoint service, it requires minimum that has to be available in two availability zones. I mean, that is when it is qualifies for the endpoint service. I mean, typically you think about the real practical use cases.
Oh,
right?
okay,
So,
got it. Yeah, so if it is two availability zones, so it requires load balancer.
Right. I mean, like, you think about why we create endpoint services typically to be consumed by other accounts. That means, I mean, obviously it has to be highly available, right? I mean, the moment you're exposing your service to be service to the other accounts, it has to be highly available. So that is when it requires you to make minimum two availability zones, so that at least if one availability zone has some problem, it is available from the another availability zone. So that starts from the minimum.
Hari, Giri here.
Yeah.
Like when you say endpoint, like web servers are in two different availability zones or two accounts. Like initially when you say that, like you said, like two accounts, in order to utilize different accounts in same account, we have to configure the endpoints. Like how exactly, like can you tell me one use case? I
Let me show you that. Yeah, so I do have a slide for that. So yeah, right, I wanted to show you this. That is where you will understand what I'm trying to do here. So let me straight away go to a slide where, so let's see this guy. So this is about actually two. So in this case, right? So for now, let's assume this first VPC is one account and the second VPC is another account. Okay. I mean,
Okay.
you see, there are three VPC accounts over here.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So what this guy was doing is, so right now, let's say we are in this VPC. Okay. Let's say we are in this VPC where we have spinned up two EC2 instances. That's what we did. And we placed each EC2 instance in a separate subnet. Right? That's what we did.
Correct.
And then what we will be doing is using the private link technology, we will be exposing or creating an endpoint service. Okay.
Gotcha.
And that will be accessible by other VPCs or other AWS accounts. That is what it is doing here. So we have three separate networks, and we can create a service which is running in this particular VPC, and that service we can expose to other networks or other accounts using this VPC endpoint service feature. So this is a way we can securely share our services to other users. You can also argue that, okay, why should I have VPC endpoint service? What I do is I just open up my firewall from ACL so that everybody can access my URL and everybody can do it, but it is not secure, right? Basically, if you look at real-time scenarios where say a company, like, again, I take the same company, like there is a vendor who wants to access your service privately, right? And that means that shouldn't be put in a public internet where everybody should be able to access it. So you want to share your service to privately to another company, and those two companies together build a solution to a big company like a tier 1 company, right? So only we have to have a connection between these three company networks, corporate networks, not through the internet, right? So that kind of scenarios, like say in this case using AWS, what we can do is the company one will have one VPC and company two will have another VPC, and we can establish the connection between this company one and company two using this kind of a VPC endpoint service. So that is how we can securely expose the services and consume the services. Okay.
Thanks, Hari.
Yeah. So yeah, so this is where we started our creating the VPC endpoint, right? So now we have our network load balancer created. So I am selecting that, and then I am creating the service. So now I have my service available here. Okay, so this is the first step is done. I mean, my service is deployed, and okay, before that, let me go to my target group, which we created, right? We created a load balancer, and this load balancer is linked with this target group. Let me see my target group, how it is doing. Okay, one is healthy and one is unhealthy. I don't know why, but as you see here, when we add the targets, it is going to tell you, it is able to ping that particular web service or not. So it's possible I might have missed the EC2, sorry, the S3 bucket role to this particular instance. Let me check. Do you see what I'm saying here? I have attached both the servers to this target group, right? So that what this target group does is, target group periodically pings that particular URL. I mean, it will do the health check, periodically pings that HTTP URL on port 8080, if it is going to receive a network packet back, saying 200 status back, then it thinks that it is healthy. That is what it did with the server 2, where it could see the response back. That means my web application is installed, deployed, and running. But whereas in the target 1, secure server 1, it did not receive any response back. That is what I am suspecting. Let's see if it has that role, EC2 access. Let me see IAM role. Okay, EC2 S3 access is there. This is for server 1. Okay, so, but anyway, still we can keep it and still it will run, because in this case, what will happen is, whichever the network load balancer, since one instance is unhealthy, every request will be served from the server 2. So we are good. This is what, I mean, maybe Sudipto, you were asking, right? This is one scenario where having at least 2 availability zones will be helpful, because one availability zone is here not working, one application server is not working, but still your service can be deployed and can be accessed with the clients. Okay, so I will not troubleshoot this guy for now, because we are still we are good to go ahead and create our endpoint service. So let me go back and check my endpoint service. So my endpoint service is up. So the next step, what I have to do is, now that I'm able to deploy my service, I'll have to add a principal so that who all can access my endpoint service. So here, what we have to do is, we have to provide the ARN, that is kind of a resource identifier for the principal of the another account. So what I'm going to do here is, I do have another account called this AWS account I have. So for that account, this is my account number. I hope nothing can be done with the account number. So this is my account number. So this is my ARN for that account. So you have to get, I mean, if you go to your account, my account, you will see a number, account number here, your account ID or number, that you can copy it and you can construct your ARN for your account. So similarly, let's say another user will have its own AWS account. It could be a root user, or it could be another sub-user created using IAM. That user will have its username, so you have to put it. In my case, what I'm doing is, I want to provide the root access, I mean root user ARN. I want to give should be able to create an endpoint. So this is how I constructed my ARN, and I go to my principals. I copy this and paste it here. Okay, I did not copy this, but let me copy this. So now I am adding into invalid principal. Let me go back. Let me see. Okay. So this is actually a small letter, but I mean, the Google has done the first letter as capital. That's why it was complaining. But otherwise, yeah, this is how the ARN will be in this format. So what I'm telling is, this service can be accessed by the another account, which I have, like I mentioned. This was my account. For that account, this is the number. So I just created it. So now what I do is, this I have whitelisted it, but still it cannot access that. Still, it has to create an endpoint request because if you remember, I have to do it again. So this dialog, right? It says require acceptance for endpoint. Like, so whenever a new client wants to consume your endpoint service, if you check this, it will not, I mean, it is a more secure way of exposing your endpoint service. Better you check it, so that even if somebody tries to create endpoint from their account, still it comes for us. There will be a notification will be coming, and we have to review that notification, and then we have to approve it. Then only they will be able to consume your endpoint service. Okay, so I did it. I mean, by default it is checked anyway. So whatever the one we created, it's already there. Right now, if you look at my endpoint connections, I don't have any endpoint connections, but the guy from this account will be able to create an endpoint connection. That is what I'm going to show now. But for now, what I did, if you look at the diagram here, I created my web service or application service, and then I created my network load balancer, and then I created my private link. So these 3 steps I have done it, and then I whitelisted this particular account or a VPC. You can look this as an account or a VPC. Okay, so till now we have done this part. Now I'm going to log out from this account. Any questions here?
Hi Hari, this is Satish.
Yeah.
I just have only one question. This endpoints, right? We have to give that the user credentials or only account ID is enough?
Yeah, it is a principle, just a ID. I mean, you need not to provide the credentials because, because credentials we don't need. It's an identity, right? So which we are just saying this particular person is going to use it, my service, but I need not to know that person's credentials.
Okay.
So did you get what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
My only one doubt is that account ID we can randomly generate and anyone can consume that service, right?
Okay. So what was the question again, please?
See, by default, I'm a Java guy, so if we expose
so I will go through that service again.
Sure.
Take 1 minute. So
No problem.
Again. So I will go back to the same service, and then from there we will take your question. Okay, so your question is, you said we are in the endpoint service. Let me go there. Yeah, so what you want to do here?
Yeah, see, we whitelisted that account ID here.
Correct.
Instead of that, can I give my user credentials, which is like username and password will be encrypted one?
No, actually, it tells it actually takes an ARN. I mean, it could be you can give a user like say you can create another AWS account, or you can create another VPC. I mean, within your account itself, you create another VPC, which I was showing in this diagram, right? This is all in the same account. So this, you can create another VPC and get the ARN for that VPC, and you can give that ARN to that here. So it all deals with the ARNs. So you can give access to a particular VPC, or you can give access to a particular user, so that they will be able to access your endpoint service, or you can give it to a particular what do you call, so you can give it to a particular EC2 also, you can give it, but you should be able to give that particular ARN.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
And this is since we are the service, right? We are the one who is exposing the service. So it is safely, we can assume that whoever adding the whitelisting the principals they are doing it with a responsibility, right? So I mean, you won't be simply whitelisting everybody in the world. So I mean, who will be doing? I mean, I have created my service, and I know to whom I have to expose it. So we will be getting that particular client URL, and you will be like whitelisting here. So let me log out.
One question, Hari.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mhm.
Like the format which you have for adding up the ARN, like ARN in AWS. So is it like by default it should be this way, or
Yeah, they have. I mean, AWS format is this, and
okay,
say this is the root account, or say this is the account number, and this is
right?
the root account. Similarly, in my account, let's say I have created 2-3 other users. I can give
Right.
that user names also. I mean, this is the ARN format. If you look at, let me say ARN format AWS, they have that Amazon resource names format.
Okay.
You can go through it, and I mean, you can do some reading, light reading.
Sure, sure.
This is a fixed format how it is.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. So let me sign out and log into the other account, which I have. See, if you look at my account, right, the number what I have here is what I copied in the title here. 940 ends with 940. Okay, so now what I can do now. Okay, so I have to go back again, but let me show you. So this is how from here. Let me delete this endpoint. I don't want it. But this is how I can create endpoint from this account. So now I am into the second account, client account, where I will be consuming the endpoint service that was created. So how I can do is, this is, I think if you attended the last session, how we were doing is we were creating endpoints using AWS services. That means all the AWS service endpoint services are listed here. In the last session we did for accessing S3 endpoint service. This is how we did. So now we are exploring about the second way of doing creating the endpoint service. So this is something which means this service is created by another AWS user or another vendor, where you should have that service name, and then you can copy that service name here, and if you find it, it will verify that service is available or not. Then if it finds it, then you will get it, and that is how you create the endpoint. Or there could be another way, is that Amazon marketplace, like you have Android marketplace, Play Store, or something like that. Similarly, we have AWS marketplace, where people develop services and expose it for consumption. That way also we should be able to create an endpoint. So I forgot to copy my service name, so I will have to go back again to the other account and copy the service name and come back to this service. So in this, probably in this session, right, I will only talk about that whole workflow, and then we will do the testing in the next session, because I see we will be running out of time. But let me sign into a different account. This is my other account where I have created the endpoint service. But while I type, feel free to ask any questions you have. So again, I am going to my endpoint service which is available. So I'm copying my service name here. This is the service name I have to provide, which when asked. Okay, so I will log out. Okay, so I have logged into my another account where I will be consuming this. I am going with creating an endpoint, VPC endpoint, create endpoint. Here I copy the service. I verified it. So, I mean, AWS was able to find that service, right? Then I am creating that endpoint in my default VPC. That means anybody who will, I mean, if you look at the service, if you remember what we have defined that service, we defined in only these two availability zones. That's why it is saying that particular service is available in these two availability zones here, right? So, but if you define that in all four availability zones in US West, in that case, it will come for all four availability zones. Okay. So let me go ahead and select it and create the endpoint. I am creating the endpoint, and security group I'm assigning default. That means it will be able to access, I mean, the ports, all ports are opened. So now I have created the endpoint, and if you look at the status, it says pending acceptance, which means as soon as we create this endpoint, the other account endpoint service tab, there will be an endpoint request will be coming there. So now I have created the endpoint here. I will log out.
So one second.
Yes.
Do you have any other browser where you can log in instead of log out? Just wanted to know.
I do have only one, but I am not sure if this guy allows me to do that or not. Do you think
I just thought
if you try incognito, it should.
Yeah.
it should work.
Incognito?
Yes.
But yeah, I am new to this Apple. So
Okay.
let me.
Go to File, New Private Window.
Oh, this guy, right? Oh, new private window. Okay. Yeah, that will save a lot of time. So 891.76. Okay, thank you. That is helpful. So here I go to my VPC service. So if you look at my endpoint connections, I see one connection pending action. What I can do is I can select that endpoint and I can either reject or accept it. In which way? So my service is very secure. I have another opportunity to reject it before establishing the relationship. So I am accepting it. So it will take some time to say it will be available. But meanwhile, I can go here. Okay. So I can go to my VPC.
What is the level of granularity? Like, let's say, let's assume that I maintain the client's infrastructure about one or some of the web services. If I want to give my IT folks to give an access on this, what is the level of granularity? Like, if I give them an access fully about this endpoint, about they can do anything, right? So, what is the level of granularity or in terms of access?
Sure. So when you create the endpoint, right, if you look at, you can also provide the security group. I mean, you can assign it the security group, and you can also control who will be able to access it and what operations. Let me do one thing. Let me say, in this case, let me select, say, gateway, gateway service, right? S3 bucket.
Okay.
Right. So in this case, we can also provide that control here. You will be able to provide your policies, what operations this particular endpoint can do. So I created an endpoint to say access S3 buckets here. You can actually specify which bucket, only, any particular S3 buckets only can be accessed with this endpoint. You can say like that, or you can say only read only access to this particular endpoint, so that they can only do an ls command or a read command, but they will not be able to say create or add a file to that s3 bucket. So that level of control you have with this endpoint.
Okay.
You will be able to provide your policies. I mean, this policy again goes to that IAM. So that's why I keep telling, like, IAM and EC2 and VPC are the three services. If you understand very well, I think I would say 65% of most of your IT task or design, everything, you will be able to do it. And even for clearing the certification, if you understand EC2 and IAM VPC well, I'm sure you need not to read any other things. You will be able to answer it. Of course, you understand those basic software principles, you will be able to clear it. All right, so now let me see the status. Yeah, so now it is available here. So this is the steps, right? So if you look at it, what I did is I created, it is also available. So I created my service, and then I have created the endpoint connection from the other client. I have searched the service by the service name. Then when I added it, I got a notification saying a new endpoint connection request. Then I'm able to accept it. But even if I don't whitelist it here, then it will not be able to, I mean, the other account will not be able to find that service, and you will not be able to initiate that service. So you see what I'm saying, right? When I created here, I searched it with that service name, I found it. That is only because I have whitelisted that particular principle here. But in this case, let me, if I log out here and log in with another user account and search that service name, I will not be able to search that. So that is another important thing you need to remember. Okay. So now what I can do is, now I have my endpoint available here. And if I look at it, I do have this DNS names here. So if I spin up a EC2 instance here, I will be able to access that particular web service. So before that, let me show you this guy here where I have exposed my service. Let me see all three. Okay, so let me go to my EC2 instances. Just want to make sure my web service is working. Let me log into this Bastion host. So from here, I see I can talk to server one. Let me see why I was, okay, let me go to my target group and say which one was healthy that time. Okay, so my target server 2 was healthy. So let me invoke my server 2. I just want to show you how that service was defined. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm not accessing that with the service, the endpoint service which I defined, but I'm trying to access it locally. Locally in the sense, let me tell what I'm trying to say. So I have another EC2 instance somewhere here, and this EC2 instance is trying to access it within this VPC itself. That's what I'm trying to do now, just to make sure the service is working. So I say wget. I have that deployed in 8080. Then it's a calc. I have an addition operation where I'm passing, say, two numbers. Number 2 is 9. It is actually wget. So this is working. So what I will do now is in this another VPC account, that is the client VPC account, I create a EC2 instance here, and I try to invoke from there. So that actually tells how I will be able to access it, right? So any questions here?
No.
So I don't know, we have 3 minutes, but I can try to do that. 1 second. I'll be back. Okay, so let me start the instance. Hey guys, I mean, yeah, I think we will do it this in the next session. I think I am my time is up, so it's a family time. So I think
Sure.
we will stop this, and next time in the next session, I will keep these resources as it is, so that I will show you how we can access that service. But hopefully, if you go through that the steps, if you remember it, we will be able to. In the next session, we will invoke this service from that second account, and then we will also talk about some VPC pairing concept, how we can pair VPCs, and then we can wind up the VPC session. Okay.
Thanks, Harry. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Sure, Hari. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, Hari.